I'm very happy to welcome back my guest today. It's always a pleasure for me to have an opportunity to talk about the history of our local politics and local issues with today's guest. He's forgotten more about our local political scene than I could hope to know, and when we get chatting, it's clear he hasn't forgotten much. He's been here on prior podcasts to discuss the development of the ION and to talk about pandemic planning in the region from his perspective as a key staff member at the Regional Waterloo for over 20 years. Today, we're going in a different direction, and we're going to talk a little bit about his time as a local municipal politician. My guest was an alderman, as they were then called, for the city of Kitchener from 1988 to 1994, and he pulled double duty as a regional councillor from 1991 to 1994. We're going to talk about some big projects that he worked on during that time. Now, he's probably worked on more local political campaigns from municipal to federal than anyone I know. And on the back half of the podcast, he's going to share with us his 7 deadly secrets for electoral success in a political campaign. And I may have called upon that expertise in my first municipal campaign. I'm pleased to welcome my friend, Bryan Stortz, to another edition of the Old Grey Mayors podcast.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be back. This is one of the few things that you're allowed to do during COVID. I
figure it's a highlight of your retirement.
Yeah.
But you know what? Before we get started, though, speaking about real highlights, talk about the volunteer work you're doing right now.
Oh, I'm doing a bunch of things right now. I'm trying to keep busy. I'm the vice chair of Hospice Waterloo Region, and I'll be becoming chair of the board in about 2 months or so. So that's actually becoming more and more challenging, because obviously we just opened our residential hospice. So it's an exciting time for that organization. I'm volunteering at the vaccine clinic at the boardwalk, and I was actually working on the bus as well, but they put that on hold, I guess, for a while. But working as one of the volunteers at the vaccine clinic, helping people get from point A to point B, and it's been really fulfilling to see. Especially some of the older folks who haven't really enjoyed time out, get their shots and how happy they are. And the other thing I've done, among other things, I'm involved with St. Mary's Church, but also I have become a Rotarian. So now I'm a proud member of Kitchener-Conestoga Rotary. So,
okay, that's because you're going to have to do a lot of fundraising for hospice.
Yeah. So I'll hit you up for tickets for lobster fest after we're done.
You know what? Some of my buddies, like Paul Reitzel, I don't know if you know Paul.
Right, very well. Yeah, he's on the board of hospice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is he on the board? Okay, yeah. Super guy, and he's always been involved in a bunch of those community groups.
And it was actually Jim, our friend Jim Erb, that approached me to join the Rotary Club, and I could not say no to Jim. He's just such a great guy, and he's done great work through that Rotary Club. And I agree with you. It's a great, structured way to do good for the community.
Yeah, but listen, so Jim gave you the tap on the shoulder, but I just want to also mention, before we get into our stuff, I just want to congratulate you on the work that your son Tony is doing at St. Mary's Church, right? I mean, I can't imagine a father being more proud of the stuff that he's doing. So tell us a little bit about what he's doing right now.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Well, Tony's the community outreach coordinator for St. Mary's, and he's working on a couple. The larger 2 pieces of work that he does are the Better Tent City, the project out at Lot 42, and he works out there with a lot of the street involved folks who live there and call that home. And he's been successful in getting working with various organizations, Sanguine and so on, to get methadone accessible there. He's been working with public health to get to make sure that individuals are getting tested, are getting their shots and so on. So that's actually remained it's a very challenging role, but he's had great success there. He's also involved with the tiny home takeout project that Father Toby has at St. Mary's Church proper in downtown Kitchener, where they're offering pizzas and really good food 5 nights a week from Tuesday to Saturday night. And that's been a real boost to the folks who are who need a good meal. And I've been there a few nights watching the people come and get food, and they're very
Yeah.
appreciative. And it's just another really good addition to our community. So Tony's taken a lead role again, working with Father Toby Collins at St. Mary's, and
Yeah.
they've
So
been
when you
great.
say taking a leave, it's like he's interrupting his education for now to do this work, right? Is that what's happening?
Well, Tony finished up at the University of Guelph last year, so he did graduate, and now he's I'm not sure what he's doing this week, but he's talked about going to med school, and he wrote his MCAS last year, and I think he's debating writing them again so he can get some better marks. So I think he has other plans, but for the time being, he thinks and he does has a tremendous position, a great job, and he's doing good things. And again, I am very proud of him.
So he got to use his carpenter skills probably to build that little takeout place, probably, eh?
Well, those are built by a local Mennonite, but he did work with the students to actually all of those the the houses down at the Better Tent City were all sort of finished off by students last summer. He helped lead that project.
And so it's good to see he takes after mom.
Yeah. Well, you can always have Louisa on a future show too, Rob.
I think I will. We could talk about some of our back and forth when I was a regional councilor.
Family
But
edition.
I love Louisa.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about you, the politician. How is it you ended up running to be a alderman?
Oh, goodness. I think I'd always wanted to run for public office. Interest in politics all through university. I lived in downtown Kitchener. I got to know former mayor, and I know he's been on the show in the past, Richard Christie. We were neighbors, and I took an interest in downtown politics. Again, I lived downtown pretty well since when I moved down here in '76, with a bit of a hiatus when I lived up near the university during latter part of undergrad and into grad school, but a long time downtown resident.
I remember you had a great place on Aaron Street.
Yeah, right at the
Aaron's,
corner.
yeah.
Aaron's, yeah, overlooking Hibner Park. And so when Richard said he was considering running for mayor, I weighed the options and decided to take a shot at city council.
And what sort of brought you to that decision? You just felt it was the right time for you, or was there a particular issue that you were interested in dealing with?
Well, no, at that time, and we can talk about that later on too. But
Yeah.
downtown was going through some challenging times. That I guess downtowns everywhere have had to compete with malls and so on. So downtown Kitchener was having its share of challenges, and felt at that time that it was going in a good direction. They'd already done some work on moving forward with the new city hall and so on. So I saw it as a role that was really complementary to my interest in working in the community. I'd worked as the EA to David Cook, the former MPP, for 3 years before that, and really enjoyed the role of the role in the constituency office.
Right.
And I'd like to deal with I liked, and I used to spend most of my time here as little as possible at Queen's Park, but I spend a lot of time here trying to help people through issues and solve problems. So that's really where my interest was locally, and it seemed like a natural transition to continue doing that kind of work in the community through getting.
Yeah, because David's constituent office would have been like downtown Kitchener, basically, or.
Yeah, initially it was up near Grand River Hospital, just this side of Central Fresh, which I guess is sort of in downtown.
Okay. Yeah, I remember the building. Yes.
Yeah. But then it moved down to in between Francis and Water, in that block there for the latter couple of years. So it was but again, given the fact that it was very accessible, we had a lot of folks come to us for help, and I think David's office, and I think we were very good at helping people, and I think that I think
yeah. So living and working downtown, you're immersed in the downtown and all that's going on with it. So no doubt you would have been developing some ideas about what to do in the downtown.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was that at that time. I again, I sort of can weave this into the city hall. That there was a discussion, towards my time on deciding to run for council about Kitchener needing to replace the city hall that had been torn down, or the historic city hall that had been torn down in the 70s, replaced by the relatively nondescript 22 Frederick Oxley building,
Yeah.
and so that was underway, and it just seemed like a very important and interesting time to be involved in local government. So there was lots, and then there was just other downtown issues. I was always interested in affordable housing, and I had served on the board of a nonprofit when I worked for David, and there was great work being done by the city of Kitchener, or starting to be done by the city of Kitchener, to advance nonprofit housing. So there were, again, a number of areas and issues that the city of Kitchener was involved with that seemed like a natural fit.
And housing is like through the ages, right? I mean, affordable housing through the ages. It's one of the most pressing issues every election, and it's, I don't know, it's a frustrating thing. I'd be interested to have like a roundtable with a whole group of people just to talk about what are the roadblocks and how do you hammer through them. But let's talk about your first campaign. This is not getting into our 7 deadly secrets, but tell us about your first campaign.
Okay, well, I guess when I was deciding to run or not, I'm trying to stay away from the 7 deadly whatever we're going to talk about later. But again, when I was considering running, I felt that if I was going to run, I wanted to be successful. And so I remember a Saturday, I had the voters list, and I remember sitting on my back deck. At that time, we were living on Ellen Street, nearby, just a couple blocks over from Aaron's, and going through it. And I told myself that if I couldn't find 500 people in Center Ward that I felt confident would potentially vote for me, I wasn't going to run, because it was competitive and all that. So I went through the list. I got through about 2/3 of the list, and it was well over the 500. In fact, I think I hit 600 or 700 people who I'd either gone to university with or had known over the years through various roles. And I felt at that point in time pretty confident that I'd have a chance of being successful. Brought together a really good campaign team of people who'd worked on campaigns before, and they were really good at keeping me focused. We ran a very
It'd be tough because you're always the one running the campaigns.
Well, that's always been a challenge. I think I've done enough campaigns where I've learned the lesson that you either can be the candidate or you can be the campaign manager. You have to pick what role you want to do. And But
so was 500 the number you thought you needed to win based on, you took a look at past campaigns?
Well, that was just a kind of an arbitrary number that I assigned to it, and I think I came up with like 640 or some 680, and that was actually what I won by. So it was just purely. And then then we got into it, and then it was all just a matter of hard work and canvassing and so on. So
canvassing, obviously that's knocking door to door. Anything else that you utilized, like coffee meetings, anything like that?
No, it was pretty basic. We didn't have all candidates meetings at the ward level, which is unfortunate, because it would have been good to have had a couple debates. A lot of it was just getting out every night, knocking on doors, and at that time too, thankfully they've advanced the date of municipal elections in Ontario to like middle of October now. But we used to have our election days in mid-November.
I know what you're going to say. Yes, go ahead.
Well, 2 things. One is that the days get short and it gets colder, and the weather gets worse as you get into November.
Yes.
But the other thing is that you have to campaign and have all your signs up through Halloween.
Right.
Yeah. So you could
Devil's Night.
Exactly. So you had to be really selective. I used to do apartment buildings where they wouldn't let the trick-or-treaters weren't usually allowed in. So I would go to the door and tell them that the next scariest thing to see was a politician, but aspiring politician. But it was but your sign certainly paid the price for being
Yeah, and also
for
too,
being
I
a
mean,
signal.
the daylight hours are getting shorter, and nobody wants to be knocking on somebody's door in the dark, right? And certainly the homeowner doesn't is a little cautious about some stranger knocking on. It's always interesting. An election campaign is the one time where a stranger can go knocking on a door, and people will answer because they kind of know it's an election going on, right? Any
Yeah.
other time of the year, it's like, whoa, who the heck is this? But that now you're limited because if you're working during the day and you get home from work, you only have a couple of hours to go knock on some doors.
Yeah, well, back then too, I'd started working at Weaver Tanner and Miller, so I was doing public affairs, public relations consulting. So I started working there with Terry Flynn. So I left Queens Park, had a new job there. I was managing John English's federal campaign at the same time and running. So so I had a very full
Oh,
dance card. So,
no
but it was
kidding.
good. Yeah, but it was good.
Wow, 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 wow. And it worked out for John, so that was great. So election, okay, so you win. Now you're new kid on the block. Were there a bunch of you? Was it sort of a group of newbies or
The class of '88 at on Kitchener Council was Jeff Lawrence and myself. So Jeff, he
oh
was elected in Forest Heights. He replaced Don Travers, and so Jeff was on council at that time. We joined. Jeff's still on council today,
yeah.
and when I was leaving the region, I was sort of reflecting on the class of '88, and the two other people that were elected on that same election were Tom Galloway, who was elected to the Catholic School Board, and somebody who you might have heard of before, Karen Redmond, was elected for her first term on the public school board. So
Yeah.
yeah, but Jeff and I were the
Oh
new
my
kids.
God. All three of those. So Tom, Karen, and Jeff are all on regional council together today.
Exactly. Yeah, class of
Oh
'88. Yeah, yeah,
wow. Wow. Well, we won't get into a talk about incumbency
yeah.
and term limits, but anyway, we'll avoid that. So okay, so you got and was it in '88? Was that still you voted amongst yourselves to see who would rep this city of Kitchener on regional council?
Yeah, it was generally again a bit of a seniority system, and
Yeah,
Jeff and I as the two newbies knew that we'd have to sit out that round, and I
so
think
that
it
was an
wasn't.
easy one. Yeah.
Well, not just that, but the learning curve just to learn the role as
Yes.
as a city councilor was steep enough. So I think having 3 or so years to learn the ropes and get to know people wasn't the worst thing in the world.
I agree with you completely. I mean, I can remember when I got elected mayor, and I wasn't even thinking about regional council at the time because I'm just focused on my nice little North Dumfries and, you know, getting, things lobbed at me and everything else. And all of a sudden now you're on regional council and now you're like, just budgets alone, trying to do budgets at the township level or city level and the regional level is a big undertaking.
Yeah, I still remember having a conversation with you when the reality hit that you were a regional councilor. What? I have to
Like,
go?
because I remember during the campaign, they when we were at the Rogers debate, they asked me a question about the ion, and I thought, well, it's got nothing to do with us. Didn't even think about
Yeah.
it. But so, what was your okay? So the downtown is like, what was the state of the downtown when you became an alderman?
Yeah, it was sort of, say in transition again, as downtowns probably across, Canada, North America, were struggling at that point in time. It was the classic competition shopping malls that places like, Fairview Park Mall and Conestoga Mall, whatever, were full of the flashy new stores, and they had
Right.
free parking, which was a sore point. And but I was actually reflecting on this since we spoke a couple of days ago that we still had Market Square was still relatively vibrant. We had Eaton's, and of course some of the legacy retailers like Eaton's, and then down the street at the King Center, Robinsons don't
Yeah.
exist anymore. So we still had some respectable retail on King Street. We had our share of challenges. When I reflect back on the issues that sort of were big at the time, like free parking always was a big
Yeah.
issue for the businesses downtown, and it seems kind of almost funny today, but arcades, like the kids hanging out, kids like you when you're in high school,
St.
Kids hanging
Jerome's
out.
forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, kids hanging out in front of zappers and stuff, and they were the bane of everybody's existence then. And I think it was just, obviously the demographics. St. Jerome, St. Mary's were still downtown. I mean, not that they were the kids in uniforms.
So that
Or
was in
uniform.
90. So in 91, that was still like, cause I wouldn't have been down there since like 78, 79. So 91, it was still those sorts of issues.
Yeah, well, but yeah, the big thing, those are the sort of issues that we dealt with, and it was just generally trying to get attention, and focus on the downtown, um, and we can transition and talk about Kitchener City Hall, but it was looking for like what.
Not yet.
Okay, well, all right, I will jump ahead, but no, but looking for like what are the sort of the big things that we could do to improve downtown.
Yeah.
And
Well, the mindset wasn't the mindset we need to do something to draw people to the downtown. So is that what the shopping malls were about at one point?
I guess, or the downtown is sort of, this is really sort of specific, but in downtown with Market Square and with the thought behind it, and you might have got this from former Mayor Richard Christie in previous podcasts, but the idea was the twin anchor approach. So you would have Market Square on the whatever the south side, east side. I don't know. Kitchener had the directions don't make sense on one end, and at the other end, up near where the current city hall is, you would have the King Center, so people would go to one mall and then walk down King Street to the other mall, and they would pop into stores and do their shopping along
In
the way.
between, like Gaudi's.
Yeah, that was the thing. Gaudi's was a great store.
Yeah.
But a lot of those stores, again, just for a bunch of reasons, were at the end of their tenure. So but the idea was to have this the concept going back, before my time on council, was this sort of twin anchor approach to bringing people downtown and moving them up and down.
So when you got on council, was there a bit of a downtown fatigue amongst the councilors, like the veterans? Because you're a new guy, Jeff's a new guy, but the rest of them been there for a while.
Yeah, I think there might have been a bit. I think I think there might have been a little bit of resistance or whatever, and I think but it was a matter of sort of recasting the sort of the narrative of downtown to make it
Right.
more comprehensive. And so yeah, there were some issues there. When I in my first term on council, I created something called the Downtown Action Committee.
Right.
And what we did was it wasn't just, I think before the predominant voices were predominantly merchants in downtown, and I think that was a very small part of the equation. So what I did to create the Downtown Action Committee was, yes, we had a good representation from the BIA, from the business community, but we also brought in other partners. And as a downtown resident who, again, used to walk down King Street every Saturday and go to the market and all that sort of stuff, I saw that there was a direct relationship between there was a natural alliance between the neighborhoods that abutted the downtown, right, and the business sector. And then the other part that we brought in was, like policing and so on. So we brought police, reps to the table as well. So we created this broad sort of multi-sector group, again, called the Downtown Action Committee, that used to meet on Friday mornings at 7:30. You can tell who called the meeting times, and we would we would bring all the stakeholders to the table. And what was interesting about that committee was that we had remember Barry Bernstein. I'm sure he's not with us anymore, but he was he worked for Buds, but he was the chamber rep. And you think, well, the chamber rep's going to be pro-business. He was pro-housing, because when he was a young man, he lived in Cedar Hill, and he knew what it was like to need housing. So the chamber rep was the biggest supporter of affordable housing.
Let me just ask you though first, like, you got this Downtown Action Committee established, but that didn't come easy though.
No, it had been, I think I had to win over council a bit on that one. I think there was, I had to sort of, reestablish some relationships and build some bridges with council. So the one thing that we did,
because Brian, isn't it like, we're in a ward system and you've got representatives, aldermen, or alderpersons, whatever the heck, from the suburbs. And, was there a bit of that downtown versus suburbs kind of vibe going on?
Well, I think the people in principle, councilors in principle, were not unsympathetic to the downtown. However, when it came to uh, facilities, again, my friend Jeff Lawrence was always, championing the community center in Forest Heights and the branch library in Forest Heights and so on.
Right.
So their bread and butter were issues in their ward. My deceased friend Gary Ledston, who he dined out for his whole career on the Lackner extension. So they were pushing, and so Gary, we got to build Lackner, and we did build Lackner. There is a bit of I guess centrifugal sort of political force that sort of pulls out to the burbs, because again, as you said, there were only two downtown councillors, Mark Yancey, my colleague from Victoria Park, and myself. Those are really the two people who had.
Is there an argument to be made, or you don't even make this argument, that you've got to focus on building or strengthening your downtown core ahead of, or something like that, versus the suburbs? Is that the sort of discussion that happens at all, or it's just like it's all got to be equal?
Well, no, I think a lot of it again is it's sort of on a project by project basis, and I think that again, I think historically there has been sympathy for the downtown, and again, under the leadership of Rich Christie, Carl, their previous mayors, very today, a lot of good things are being done in the downtown,
Yeah.
but it's often comes down to budget dollars, and
Right.
Kelly Galloway Sealock has some great facilities in her ward.
Southwest. Yeah.
Yeah, more power to her.
Yeah.
But those are the voters that they're accountable to. So no, but I think what I'm sort of getting back to was that I saw that it was beneficial to have a broader coalition to bring in neighborhoods and have I was about to say is that the biggest supporters of downtown retailers were the neighborhood folks. So we brought in reps from all the neighborhood associations around the downtown. So we started to expand and broaden that sort of coalition that was so
you had more buy-in. But the other thing I wanted to mention is you had mentioned this to me about the Downtown Action Committee in terms of how it was structured was important in terms of its reporting process within council.
Yeah, and perhaps because of some history, the way that I was able to sell it to council in the day was that it would not report directly to council. So anything that happened and through the Downtown Action Committee had to go through one of the standing committees of council. So finance, parks and rec, and so on. So whatever we did needed to be vetted through one of the standing committees, get approved there before it went to council. So that I think might have initially seemed like a problem, but it was actually really good, because you had a chance to at the committee level really talk about, have delegations, sell the changes and projects that you were passionate about there, and then it had another go to council. And the other thing in that day, that the media would cover the Downtown Action Committee at 7:30 on a Friday morning, then they would cover committee, then they would cover council. So so these projects got a lot of attention.
So it was almost like it was double vetted before it got to a final council vote.
Yeah, so it had to pass muster at committee before it could even make it to council. Which
so
was
your approach then with this action committee was like a consensus building approach.
Well, we had a lot of small wins at the time, and some of the things that we got were again, support for enhanced parking in the downtown. We got parking in the bus bays, and like that, like these are relatively small wins, but like at that time, like today, there's actually parking on King Street. Back then, there was no parking on King Street at all. So we got those sort of issues looked at. A lot of the neighborhood issues really dealt with property standards. So we would bring in the staff that were in charge of those areas, and come up with initiatives because it wasn't just, sorry, Rob.
Yeah, because Cortland and Duke were one-way thoroughfares, were it at that time, or was that they were still two-way?
They became two-way streets in 1996 when I was the editor of Kitchener This Week, our proud local newspaper, which we'll talk about.
That's a different podcast.
And I actually went to council that night. The only time I set foot back in the council chambers was to be there to hold witness when council voted to get rid of the ring road, because I hated the ring road. I felt it was like it was an unfriendly a pedestrian unfriendly moat
Yeah.
around downtown Kitchener, part of, well-intended, but, badly executed planning from the 60s and early 70s. So
Yeah.
yeah, the ring road was the Duke and Charles were one way at that time. And it was one of my ambitions in life was to get rid of the ring road.
Was that something the Downtown Action Committee had focused on as well as something that needed to be done?
Not really. We dealt with more granular things, and as I said, the issues really weren't focused specifically on retail and business and all that. There were neighborhood issues as well, and
Yeah. And I mean, credit to you because you didn't have the Economic Development Fund, the $100 million Economic Development Fund that came later on, or you didn't have the ION that came through and created, a bunch of stops around which, there's massive development. And, you didn't have all those things. It's sort of like, those are like nuclear weapons. And I think we use this analogy, you had like the Ross rifles of armaments to try and do something back then.
oh, again, I would have loved to have had a fraction of the capacity that they had with the Economic Development Fund, or the exciting catalytic urban power, firepower of the LRT. Like but back then you had to play the hand that you were dealt.
Yeah.
And we made the best of it as we do. But we did have, again, there was a good relationship again between the downtown business area, and then we brought in the police and the neighborhoods and all that. So we did have a forum that brought folks together, and I think everybody worked towards a common good.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than indifference leading to further disintegration or decimation or what have you. You brought in a group of people that continued to maintain interest in trying to see something happen.
Yeah.
And eventually that energy, we could say that energy led to a lot of the other things that came later on because it kept the fires burning bright on the downtown.
Yeah, it was foundational, and I think it was the other thing that when we went through some of the problems later, the one thing that I used to always say and still feel passionately about is that the neighborhoods around the downtown for the most part are very vibrant. So like I live in what's now Auditorium neighborhood.
Right.
And I used to live in Civic Center, which is now Old Berlin, and those neighborhoods, despite some of the issues that might have been sort of more visible on King Street, the neighborhoods in downtown Kitchener have remained very vibrant. And if you look at house sales in this neighborhood, people just go crazy, like they open bids on these houses. So these are still to this day very, very popular places for people to live.
Yes, it's like Midtown.
Midtown, yeah.
So, okay, now tell us about your, getting the package on Sunday nights. That's always an interesting story to me because when I was the mayor or regional councilor, I would just get my package, go through it, and show up at a meeting and have some discussions, and then have a vote.
Yeah.
but that was the tip of the iceberg. Apparently, I was missing a whole lot more.
Yeah, I heard those stories about you, but
I just showed up.
No, but a lot of it was like again, I had a sort of a standard. I don't think I was unique, but I'd spend Sunday nights reading everything from top to bottom. So I would go into committee well prepared. But then if there were issues that I felt strongly about, I would start burning up the phone lines with my colleagues and ask for their support, explain issues to them, and so on, and try to get a receptive ear. And for the most part, they were a good bunch. We had actually a pretty interesting council at that time, but and I would sort of make sure that on when we arrived at committee day, I had the votes in the room to get what I wanted. So it was just a matter of, and often too, you phone somebody up and they say, well, I'd like, I've got something coming up that I feel strongly about.
Yeah,
how about this? And there was a lot of give and take, but it
sure. But I think that makes you a strong advocate for the downtown and making sure that at least something's happening. Now, I want people to know that we will do a future podcast, not just on your newspaper, but we're going to do a podcast as well, talking about the downtown and the stuff that was happening and the deterioration and the work you went through, because just talking about that's going to consume a whole show. So we're not like just glossing over it. There was a lot of, it's not like a yada yada and everything was cured. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of that that went on. So we'll talk about that. But let's talk about the city hall. So we've had Richard Christie on, and he talked about how the site was selected, okay, and the site that they ended up picking, and how they ended up choosing that over for the Kitchener Farmers Market, the current location, as the site. But so now Richard, you took over from him because he ran for mayor and lost to Dom Cardillo. So now you're part of the council that is building the city hall. What was that like?
that was fascinating time, and it was yeah. So the previous council had decided to own rather than rent, and had acquired the site where the current city hall is. And I remember Richard telling me where it was going to be located, and I kept going saying, "What? It's there?" Like it seemed like I could not for a minute envision that block as the city hall. Today, I think with all the improvements on Gaukel Street and the things like the Blues Festival linking to the park,
Yeah.
I think it was a inspired location. Like flashback, a few years
Sure.
ago, I was scratching my head. So that decision to be made. But then we had to go through the process of building the city hall and getting it approved, and that was a very bumpy road. There was a divided council at that time. Virtually every vote on the city hall was 6-5. So again, it was razor thin votes on just about every matter. There was we went through. We had a national design competition. We shortlisted a half a dozen of the top architecture firms in Canada. We ended up with probably one of the best firms in Canada, Kouabara, Payne, McKenna, Bloomberg. Bruce Kouabara was the lead architect who led the project. I remember the night we had the unveiling at the center in the square, there was all these crazy looking projects that just were random. And there was one that just like stood out. And thankfully the panel recommended that we go with Kouabara's firm. So we went down that path, and then we started getting costing on it. This sort of led to some of the pushback we got from a certain component of the community. So when the project was sort of floated out in 1987, like in the early days, they picked a number which I think was maybe optimistic but not realistic, of 35. Look at my notes here.
15 original cost down was like 15 million.
I think, I don't know if that might be a really old one, but
okay.
So like the original concept in 87 was 35 million. I'm not sure that included land or not. So that was sort of a number that people had, that was a public number. And then as we started moving forward, the number crept up a little bit. And then, and I'm going to really kind of cut short a very long process. We had a what's called a quantity surveyor, a company that assesses what things are going to cost when they're finally built. This is before we made the decision. And I think we hit somewhere in the turn of around the area of, I'm just trying to check my notes here. I think it ended up being around 68 to 70 million. So it was almost a doubling of the cost. And I still remember the day that number was out. I remember like literally my knees buckled. Like, I was like, like Carl Zara chaired the City Hall steering committee, but I was sort of,
well, he was the finance chair. You were the vice chair of the finance committee.
Vice chair of finance, yeah. And I believe I was the vice chair of the City Hall steering committee. It was Carl and I did a joint role in that area. So so it was, like there was a bit of sticker shock at that point in time. And when you look at it today, like the bus barns up on Northfield are 120 million and nobody blinks an eye. We build a wastewater treatment plant at 400, nobody cares. But these were different times, and it was sort of reflecting on some of the blowback we were getting, the very loud voices that said don't build it or build something cheaper. And at that time, Will Ferguson was sort of leading the charge. Former councillor Will.
Well, just
Ferguson
hold on Will. Will was elected in around 1990.
No, Will was elected way before. He was
okay. Yeah. Oh no, that was provincially was 1990. And then so Will was there, and then in 1990 he leaves to run provincially, and he's successful. And then Mike Wagner comes in to replace him. But anyway, go ahead. So Will was part of the core of that. You said the votes were like 6-5. He was part of that five group.
Will was sort of the leader, and Will was again he's passed but he was really good at. Will was a great shit disturber, and he was very good and if he's looking down or looking down
He's
on you,
smiling. He's smiling.
smiling. He is, yeah. But he was good. So he was the main antagonist, and it was sort of the struggle to get it. And there was call for a referendum at one point in time. And they brought a motion to council, and there was all people delegating saying that a project of this magnitude needs a referendum, much like the great referendum they had back in the 70s that tore down the old city hall. But
was that a referendum?
It was, yeah.
So you can't blame the politicians then. It's like Brexit. Blame the people.
The will of the people, yeah. But I felt strongly that I was elected to make decisions, and others felt the same way. And copying out and sending something out for referendum really wasn't leadership. So I figured that, you know what, I'm going to vote for it in a couple of years' time when the next election comes up. If you don't like what I've decided to do, people have the ability to.
That's exactly it. I think people, especially municipally, they elect you. You go run the government. You go do what you need to do. You take care of things. I'm doing my day-to-day job and hanging with my family and my friends and doing my recreational activities and painting my house or mowing my lawn. So you go do what you got to do, make those decisions. If I'm unhappy, come next election, I can, vote you out. But if we go to the people every time you got to make a decision, where does that stop? Right? Then what do I need you for?
Yeah, but there was a groundswell. I mean, there was obviously seen as a way to stop the project because
that would be the reason. Yes.
It wasn't as if they wanted to really get the opinion of the public. They wanted to get somebody to veto it. Then there was then I think.
Okay, let me ask you this though. So the votes are close 6-5. The cost keeps going up and up and up and up. You're able to hold on to your core of the 6.
Yeah, we did pretty well. I mean, everybody hung together. A couple of things we did was as we got closer, it became like very, very controversial. We had a number of Mondays back to back to back, I think like 5 or 6, where we had televised council meetings on Rogers, and they would go from 7 till like 1 in the morning, and we had delegation after delegation after delegation saying, "Don't build it." There were some people that were positive voices, but for the most part, we had a lot of people. I remember walking out of our offices at 22 Frederick in our old council building, and you could not move from the crowds of people that were jamming the lobby and the chambers, and you had to kind of whittle your way through to get to your seat. And it was people who were opposed to the project.
The booze and hisses.
Oh yeah, we had we had some people that were quite animated. So we had that was the process we went to. But but a couple things happened to help us along. One was that we made a decision to downscale the project, and we took out like 3 or so or 2 or 3, we took several $1 million out of the project without diminishing the.
What did you cut? Like what?
I think it was, I truly don't remember. I think it was just small things, here and there that we could eliminate from the project. But we
landscaping.
Well, there was just a lot of small decisions that were made to bring it down. So
what about the ice rink?
Well, we can come to that in a second. So we dealt with that, and then the other thing was that we got fortunate that or unfortunate, it was during a recession that we went to the market with it, and in the early 90s, the economy was really down.
Right.
So Ellis Don won the tender, and they were a fairly aggressive company when it came to projects like that. So they lowered the price down. So I think the price was sort of I think it was like 64 million at the end. And so we did see savings both from aggressive tendering process to again eliminating some of the components whatever. So you asked about the ice rink. So the ice rink was in the program, but at the 11th hour, Will Ferguson got council to vote to essentially eliminate it by backdoor. I think by eliminating any support for it or whatever. So council, and that on a weak moment, somebody voted with Will, and the ice rink was eliminated from the program. And
so one of the 6 went the other way.
Yeah, and I can't remember the exact vote, how
That's
it
all
would
right.
have,
That's
who might
okay.
have,
But it was
who
out.
might have flipped. But so we ended up for a period of time having what would have been just a big concrete slab in front of City Hall with nothing on
Like
it.
in Waterloo.
So yeah, so it was eliminated. So I had to go out and essentially get enough councillors who had voted against it to reconsider the vote. And
Did you get that vote after Will left or before Will left?
I think it was after Will left.
So
I
you know you
think,
had Mike Wagner in there.
yeah, I believe so. Or Mike may have not been elected, but it was a period after that we had. I'm not sure if Mike was around to vote for it or not, because there had to be a by-election and so on. But enough councillors, like, so there was a little bit of horse trading and wheeling and dealing on it, but um, a number of them just said, I remember one colleague said, I don't think this is the right decision, but I think I'd made the case to him. But you know what? I'm going to let you be proven wrong in the future. So I'll vote for it now, but you're going to have to
Oh,
own this.
okay. All right.
And another, the one, and I won't name any of my former colleagues, but one of them who I could not get to move on it, who was a hockey guy, said that no one would ever use it. It's too small. No one will ever use it.
Oh,
And
geez.
whenever I drive down King Street now, and Angela's sick of hearing me about it, when I see on a Sunday afternoon, and it's packed and there's families, yeah, I think of that counselor. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nobody's using it. It's packed. So
So
it's been very successful,
I
and it
just want to
wouldn't have
say
been the same
this. I
without.
just want to say we'll wrap up this on this point. You know, big projects, everyone always gets nervous about big projects, but municipalities can afford big projects. They can make big, bold, transformational investments in their community when there's a good case for it. And oftentimes you get people that are very concerned about doing it. But if we don't make those investments and sometimes have to take on debt, sometimes, because we're going to talk about that here, you don't make those transformational changes that generally the public will support and a municipality in the long run can afford. Now, when you cut the red ribbon on this place, did you owe money on it or was it paid for?
When we turned the key in the door, it was paid for, and it was thanks to the fact that the Kitchener enjoys or has retained the ownership of its gas utility and a very robust capital program, and essentially the day that we turned the key in the door, it was paid for.
It was paid
And
for. There you go,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So because they'd earmarked of funding for it, again, in a very well managed capital program. The other person I should mention, and again, it'd be remiss if I didn't mention him, was our CAO at the time was a gentleman by the name of Tom Mackay.
Oh,
And
yeah. Oh, Tom
Tom
Mackay. Yes.
Tom was a very strong. He was a strong CAO, strong-willed,
Yeah.
and he helped us navigate through a lot of that a lot of that stuff. So we had strong leadership, I think, on the
He was a
elected
straight
side.
shooter, Tom Mackay. Straight shooter.
He was. I can do that. I won't even do any Tom Mackay impersonations because of his accent, but he,
No wonder it was paid for, Scotsman. But anyway,
yeah.
so okay, let's move on to the 7 deadly secrets.
Oh, okay.
All right, because we got about 10 minutes.
We only covered about a quarter of what we're going to talk about.
I know you'll be back.
Yeah.
So look at first time I ran. I was dealing with a bit of a flamethrower situation, to use that phrase from our good friend Terry Follis's books about the flamethrower. And I was getting a lot of negative ads happening to me. And I went in to have lunch with you, and I was telling you about this. And as quick as before we even had dessert or whatever, you said, well, just add this one word and a period. Positive and a period, because I was always like, for a change, Rob Deutschman, for a change. And then you're like, positive period, for a change. And I was able to turn that negative advertising, and I was being the positive, and everyone loves positive, and it was a really good change in my campaign and really helped out a lot. But tell us now, because I'm drawing on your experience of many, many, many campaigns and helping out some people that might be thinking about running down the road. Let's start with some of your 7. And I just said, give us 7. So why don't you run through them, the 7 of them, and then we'll go through each individual one quickly.
Okay. Well, just some background too. That again, ran a couple times municipally, ran provincially in '95, managed a whole bunch of campaigns, and I was never involved in a municipal campaign locally. Even though I obviously get drawn into lunch with an old friend, which I didn't even remember that conversation.
I'm shocked that you would say I'm the only municipal campaign you've ever advised or talked about. So
no, I've forgotten all about that. It's a suppressed memory of some sort. But no, memory. I guess a couple of things in that, I'm talking to a lot of candidates over the year, and maybe I'll go through them, and then we can come back and dig into the ones you want. Is that and this is from individuals who I've spoken to over the year who've aspired to run. I always say, know your why. Like, why are you running? What's your motivation? And it's interesting that sometimes if people say for the fame and for the money, well, you know what, you're probably not going to be successful. You're doing the wrong thing with your life. So often do that. And over the years, on other levels of government, Tim Lewis had a beautiful why. Catherine McGarry. A lot of people have really thought through why they want to run for public office. So if you're going to run, know why you're running and be able to articulate that, because people are going to ask you at the doors. And if it's not authentic, then people will see right through it. So know why you're running. And I'd say, which flows out of that is pick issues that matter to you, and do your research, talk to people. Number two. Do so find issues that matter to you. And I used to have this magic Bryan's rule of six areas that you should think about sort of, championing or being involved with when you get elected. So pick issues that matter and do the research. And again, it goes back to the first point is you need to run for a reason. Are you running to win? More says the question, or are you just running?
Number three, your objective.
Okay. Having number three is, are you running to win? What's the purpose of running? If you're running, to sort of make a statement on an issue, then that's fine. But know why you're running, and be realistic. And I always ask people, how many votes do you need to win? And going back to the previous story, we talked about my own sort of exercise that I knew that I needed a certain number of votes to win. Yeah. And they're so just so people are realistic when they go into it. Sort of the next one, 4 is flowing out of that is do your analysis. Look at results from previous elections. Turnout matters. Engaged communities vote. People, look at people's, age, income, education. It's that old adage, fish where there's fish. So you need to, really know where to allocate your time. And that, whether you're running for, city council or school board or mayor or regional chair, there's never enough time to hit all the doors. So you really need to know where to put your,
especially regional chair. I never, before I jumped in, I didn't really think about it, but that was like 5 ridings. It was massive.
Yeah, no, it's a big region, and you know that so well.
Do I ever?
Do you ever? Yeah. The next
number 5
would be create a realistic budget. Don't spend what you don't have. So just make sure that if you're going to run, it's I've said this many times during campaigns. Money's easy to spend and hard to raise. And at the local level, you can't give tax receipts. It's really tough. So make sure that when you're planning your campaign, especially at the local level, be realistic about what you can afford to spend. Signs aren't cheap. Brochures aren't cheap if you're going to do a couple canvases. Social's relatively cost effective.
I think that inability for to give a tax receipt or whatever, a donation receipt, that is just unfair versus provincial and federal levels. The other thing, though, it says make sure you file your return when you're done, right?
Yeah, I guess that's part of the. There's a couple of things that you need to do. One is, I guess part of it is know the rules. These we're going to get away from numbers, but there are laws that govern election campaigns, and if you're going to be running, you've got to keep your receipts. You've got to no cash
donations,
and then be prepared if you reach a certain threshold. I'm a little rusty on the act right now because I have done this for a long time, but there are some thresholds that you have to be aware of, and be prepared to get your keep your paperwork, file your routine. It's not onerous, but if you don't file it, you could be prohibited from running again, or at least for one election. So it's a big deal. And the other part too is sort of tying into the idea of legislative constraints. There are rules around where you can and can't put your signs. So and take them down afterwards.
You got to get them down quick. My buddy Mike Farwell likes to just make a career out of complaining about signs on boulevards.
Well, the sort of now that I'm no longer employed by the region, I can show my bias on signs on regional roads. I hated them. I hated them as a campaign manager, as a candidate, and I think it's a travesty that people put signs up on public properties.
This is what I'll say about signs, though. If you're not the incumbent and trying to get your name out, it's hard because you cannot get enough residences to put signs on residences. It hinders people who are not the incumbent.
You know what? Start early, knock doors.
Oh my God, I started very early. But anyway, okay, number 6.
Okay, campaigns are physically demanding and stressful. So go into the campaign rested as best you can. So it's and you got to take care of yourself. And I found, I mean, that's from a very personal standpoint, that especially in '95, where I was nominated like forever because we thought there'd be a by-election in Kitchener because of some of the issues that Will Ferguson was involved with. We were, and I went into that election exhausted, and I ended it like I was down to like 110 pounds. Like I was just worn. And again, this is a very personal thing, but because of the stress of having to canvass and do debates and all that sort of stuff, if you're not in a good state going into the campaign, you're never going to recover during the election because it's stressful. You don't sleep great. So take care of yourself. I guess even during a campaign, take care of yourself, get some sleep, but also to try to go in a good space.
Yeah. It's, I mean, physical health, mental health. When you're, for a lot of people, they're working, dealing with the family and campaigning. That's a lot to juggle, even when you're fully fit. So.
Yeah. And going door to door, which will lead me to my last point.
Yes, number 7. Drum roll.
It's very demanding. Very demanding. This is my. I want everybody to write this down. Who's going to start? Buy comfortable shoes. Style does not matter when you're running. Nobody's going to see your feet on a dark night when you're, slushing through the leaves.
As you said, a cold, rainy, dark night.
Yeah, nobody's looking at your feet. Yeah. So go out and buy the most comfortable shoes you can. And if you're going to be remotely successful, wear those shoes right down.
Get 2 pair. If you're going to be successful, get 2 pair. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
and then get out and knock doors and do what you got to do. But it's so that's
so Brian, tell me, we didn't even talk about your time on region as well, regional council, but as a municipal politician, like when we were growing up and stuff, we always thought about provincial politics, federal politics. Municipal politics was never really much on our radar generally when you and I were younger and doing, party politics stuff. But I found personally that municipal politics was probably the most rewarding thing that I'd ever done in terms of your contribution to the community. What's your sense of municipal politics in general?
Oh yeah, I totally echo that that locally you can actually see things to completion, and you can actually see you can actually make a tangible difference in your community. Federally, provincially, and the higher up you go, like you might have a piece of legislation that you're shepherding through, but you really never see anything done. Whereas if you feel strongly about bike lanes or anything like that, you can actually make a tangible change in your community. That's one of the attractions. The other thing too is that having again run both locally and provincially, you are in control of your own destiny. And what I always say to people who are running for one of the major political parties is it's like you're buying into a franchise and you're told like what to say, what to think, whatever it is, and you've got very little or no latitude to sort of to deviate from the party platform. And I remember when I ran in '95 for the first I guess 5-week campaign. For the first 3 weeks of that campaign, we were Lynn McLeod was our leader. It was the first Harris sweep, and then the last 2 weeks of the campaign, the wheels came off, and it was. The debate didn't serve Lynn very well. I love Lynn McLeod. I was a supporter of hers, and
very nice lady, very sincere lady, great family. Yeah.
But I remember the Toronto Sun ran a front page thing. Just a bit of a tangent here, but we had a component in our platform that dealt with family violence. And what it said was that for something to be considered family violence, it didn't have to do, with, fists and bruises, but it can be, sort of mental abuse as
Sure.
well.
Yep.
It was a really thoughtful thing. So the Toronto Sun, that lovely birdcage liner, broke it down to kind of a limerick, and it said, "Shout at your spouse and lose your house." And they made it
Yeah.
that. And guys would come into our headquarters, holding the Toronto Sun, just yelling, saying, "You mean to say that if I, say something to my wife, she's going to take my house and all that?" And that was sort of the spiral. That was remember the Saturday that happened. That sort of, and it became tougher and tougher. And even, like individuals who were employed in the public sector wanted their tax cut. And
Yes.
and I guess my point is that, there was no getting around that. So
No. But the nice thing about municipal politics, which comes up often in the various podcasts, is there's no party politics. You are your own person. You're working collaboratively with a group of people around the horseshoe to make decisions, and then you move on to the next issue. Well, Bryan, listen, we're going to end it on that. And I'll just say this. I'm passionate about this podcast, and I'm doubly passionate when you come on. So listen, thanks again for being on the show today, and we'll be back again soon. So this has been another edition of the Old Grey Mayor's podcast. I want to thank you for having listened and tagged along with us. Thanks again. All the best.